morning and welcome to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I'm your host, Trillia, and today is special. Today, I am live in the studio with my very special guest. I'll tell you about her in just a second. Typically, I share a thoughts or reflection to prep us for our time together, but today, I'd like to get right to it. I have a feeling you'll have plenty of questions today. I do think it's important that you know that today's show is focused on sexuality and all sorts of areas and topics related to it. It's a broad topic and probably one of the most important in our society today. And there's no one better to discuss this topic than my guest, Dr. Julie Slattery. Dr. Slattery is a clinical psychologist, author, speaker, and the president, co-founder of Authentic Intimacy, a ministry devoted to reclaiming God's design for sexuality. In 2020, Julie launched sexualdiscipleship.org, a platform designed to help Christian leaders navigate sexual issues and questions with gospel-centered truth. Julie is the author of 14, we'll talk about that, books, and host of the weekly podcast, Java with Julie. And it's so great. I've been on your podcast.
You have.
Yes. So it's so fun to have you and to get to talk about such an important topic. I do want to start with, you have 14 books. So is that right? Or do you have more than that?
I know, that's right. I think that's including the one coming out this summer with Moody. So
I was
that's
about to say,
up to date.
There's one coming. Yeah. And that is that's really wonderful. But one of the things that I like to do is allow my listeners to get to know someone. Mm-hmm. And one of the sweetest ways is through our testimony. Mm-hmm. So would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and how you came to know the Lord?
Yeah. So, Trillia, I feel like I came to know the Lord when I was a year old. Because when I was a year old, my parents had both of them within 3 months of each other, like radical encounters with God. They were both seekers, and I was number 5 out of 6 kids, and they were trying to manage life on their own without the Lord and just hit some walls, and God intervened. And so I grew up in a home with a mom and a dad who were on fire for the Lord. I just remember being in church all the time, having Bible studies in our home. And so I don't even remember when it was that I probably first gave my life to God. I was the kid, every Sunday, like, are you sure? Yeah, raise my hand again. I want to go to heaven. So, and then just as I grew, you kind of wrestle more with, what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to give my life to God? And so I definitely have like certain pillars or times where it's like there was more of a sense of what it is to be surrendered to Him. Yeah. And I don't think that stops. There are probably 4 or 5 events in my life starting in high school that I can go back to and say, yeah, that's when God claimed me as His own, or where He set me apart for Him. And I want to continue on that road to just have those special times where God takes us deeper.
I think every testimony is a powerful testimony of God's grace and mercy and His power. And so I love it when people have grown up in such encouraging homes where you just heard the gospel at such a young age. Could you tell us one of those times when you really sense that God was with you, and when you knew, okay, this isn't just something in my home, this is mine.
Yeah. The first time I think I really experienced that, I was 14 years old, and my family had grown up in Akron, Ohio, and we were moving to Florida. We were moving to South Florida. And I was going into the 8th grade, loved being in Ohio. Like, everybody knew my family. I was just one of the kids. And it was so traumatic for me to move that I was starting to struggle with an eating disorder. And my parents sent us to Word of Life camp for 2 weeks while they were moving everything down to Florida. And I remember just being at Word of Life and being in such turmoil as an adolescent kid who was afraid, like my whole security felt like it was being ripped out from under me, and just really devoting my life to God there and just saying, God, I don't know what I'm walking into, but I want to be used by you. I want to walk with you. And so I still remember like the rock I was sitting on by myself, where it was like God just captured me and asked me to trust him. And in my new school to just be, asked me to be somebody who would proclaim him and grow in him. So that was the first time I really had this sense of, this is not my parents' faith. This is mine. And God's going to teach me how to walk it out on my own.
Wow. And what an amazing lesson at the age of 14. That's the kind of lesson that we're learning still.
Yeah.
So that's surrender.
Yes.
That's trusting the Lord for your next steps, your journey, where you're going. And so I think that's really remarkable. Now, to go from there to you have a ministry completely focused on sexuality. How do you go there? Because it's unique.
It is.
There are you rarely hear of people who are diving so deep into this very important topic.
Yeah.
I think most people are afraid of it, to be honest. And so, which is one reason why I'm really excited to have you on, so that we can dispel some of those fears and really help equip people to have the conversation. But how did you get
Where did
there?
this come from? Yeah. It was step by step. So as a young adult, I knew that I wanted to go into the kind of ministry that deals with marriage and family issues, got my degrees in psychology, became a counselor, started doing some writing and speaking for women and marriage issues and things like that. But it wasn't until I think I was like 39 or 40 that God just took me through another period of time. This was probably the most profound kind of spiritual change for me, where he really taught me what it was to seek his face more intimately and to encounter him. And it was maybe a 9 or 10 month journey of just unrest, of seeking the Lord, that just kind of came out of nowhere. And through that 9 or 10 month journey, I was working at Focus on the Family during that season. And so I was in ministry, but God just started to burden my heart in a different way. Like, actually gave me a physical pain in my chest that would wake me up at night, that just when I'd be praying, it would just hurt. It was this burden. And I had a woman who was mentoring me who said, you need to start asking the Lord what he's calling you to. And so I started asking him, and then he made it clear over a short period of time that he was calling me to step into sexuality. And I just sort of got this picture that there are all these people that are crying out silently to the Lord, where are you? Like, where are you in my struggle and my pain? And the church is so silent that they feel they can't reach out. And so it's kind of a long story, but I just encountered God opening amazing, miraculous doors, like just dropping things in my lap, like, you're going to do this, then you're going to do this, then you're going to do that. And so I look back and I'm like, it was just all God. He called me to it. He equipped me for it. And I want to stay in that posture of continuing to be dependent on him, because it's a conversation that's so sensitive and so important that in my own strength and wisdom, I can't get it right.
100%.
We need his Holy Spirit to guide us.
Absolutely. Were you married at the time?
I was, yeah.
What did your husband say? Like, hey, I'm going to quit my job.
He was along the ride for me. So he saw this 9 or 10 months of me seeking God. Like, I literally could not watch TV or read a book other than like an A.W. Tozer or Moody book, that was taking me deeper with the Lord. So he sees the spiritual journey. He's like, something's going on with my wife. Like, he even sent me to a cardiologist for the chest pain. I'm like, I know it's a spiritual burden. So when he saw that, and then it evolved into God is calling me into this space, and he saw, God out of nowhere bring money to start a ministry when I wasn't even looking to start one.
Oh, wow.
It was like, we were both like, God's moving. So we went away for a weekend and prayed through it and cried through it. And, he just really continues to say, Julie, if I say A and God says B, always do what God says. And so he's been on this journey with me and seeing that it's not my idea. And we're just really together trying to follow where God is leading.
That's amazing. And that's so encouraging. So now you have been in this ministry for several years.
It's been about 13 years
13 years. And you've probably seen, I can't even imagine the change of the conversation in 13 years. I think it's changed in the last 3, 4. I mean, it
has.
just is constantly evolving. And so we only have about 2 minutes left, but I do want to think about this changing landscape and how we can navigate that. But real quick, how have you navigated it?
Yeah, I continue to learn. So I always want to be in a posture of learning. What I was talking about 10 years ago isn't what I'm talking about today. And even I'm going back and revising things that I wrote back then because the nuance is different today. The sensitivities, what I've learned is new. The struggles are new. Yeah. And really the presuppositions are different. So we're not starting with, even within the church, with givens like there's male and female.
Right.
And so we have to back way up and sort of dissect how things have changed and how people gain an understanding before we start addressing the issues themselves.
No, that makes sense. And so you're starting in Genesis 1 when usually maybe you would have started somewhere else before. That makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that I have been grateful for is that there's also a lot more openness to talk about abuse and those hard realities that so many people have faced that may be part of the reason for dysfunction or fear or you name it. And so I'd like us to talk through all of these things. We have a lot to talk about. So I know if you're listening right now, you're thinking, okay, I might have a lot of questions. If you have questions about anything related to sexuality, about how to care for a loved one, anything you can think of. Now, I'm not saying we can answer anything, but we sure would like to try. Give us a call at 877-548-3675. That's 877-LIVE-675. Again, 877-548-3675. Our phone lines are open. We'd love to hear from you. I know this is a sensitive topic. You can also email us, livingbyfaith@moody.edu. So you can drop me an email and I can read it, livingbyfaith@moody.edu. I am really grateful for this time and that we get to think through, talk about, pray about, and learn about the importance of sexuality. So more with Julie Slattery when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I am so happy to be live in the studio with Julie Slattery. And Dr. Julie Slattery, she is an author. She is also the founder of Authentic Intimacy. And we are talking about that. We are talking about sexuality, to be specific. And I just wanted before the break, we started to talk about the changing landscape. So how specifically, and I know you talked about how we have to start at a different place. We really need to start with just the clear idea that God has created us as male and female. That it cannot be assumed. But what else has changed, do you think? And how has it changed you?
Yeah. So I'll pick out a few things that have changed. Yeah. One of them is something that you just sort of mentioned. Why do we not have an assumption of male and female anymore? Why do we have all these changes in how we define what's normal and what's good? And so we've got to back up and say the main reason why is because we've gone from being kind of a God-fearing society. Even if people weren't Christians, there was a sense where there's a creator and he has given us a way to live, a moral code. The 10 Commandments are in courtrooms and in God we trust. And there was a sense that even if you weren't a Christian, there was a creator that you would fear. To now really being the majority of people in the Western world are working from a postmodern relativistic mindset, a humanistic kind of mindset, which says the greatest truth is to be found within me.
Yep.
Yes. And so when we start with that, Whether you're talking about a 10-year-old kid or a 40-year-old person, you learn to look inward with what is true about me.
Right.
Like even in the church, there's a sense to where we're looking into what would make me happy. What does my heart want? What feels like the authentic me? And as soon as you make that shift, all bets are off. And it's not just the explanation of where we are with the LGBT movement. Certainly it is. But it also explains why we begin to approach marriage and relationship with the thought of, am I happy? Is this fulfilling? Am I still in love with this person? Do we still have a sexual chemistry? And so people make decisions now based on what's happening internally,
Right.
instead of, no, God is revealing something about himself. Like sexuality isn't primarily to reveal what's in me, it's to reveal who God is. And that we learn to align ourselves to what God has revealed about himself. And so that's the primary switch that explains a lot. The secondary thing that kind of adds to it is how common pornography is, both for men and women. The research just blows your mind when you see that, over 90% of men in certain age categories are actively using pornography, and over 70% of women. So in the younger age categories. And that's defining pornography as, the porn sites and things like that. But when you also define it by some of the shows that we stream and the music we listen to, like pornography shapes how we view each other, how we view ourselves, how we understand sexuality, how we understand wholeness. So you've got those movements. And then we could also talk about sort of the backlash of the purity movement. So I think when you combine those three things, you've got kind of a whirlpool of confusion.
Yeah.
And so you can't just go to the issue itself. You've got to backtrack and start helping people make sense of how those forces have really impacted the way they even think about themselves.
Yeah. Let's unpack this, because there's a lot in what you just said. And the first one is I kind of latched on to the am I happy in marriage and the kind of me focus. So how would you, if you were with a husband and wife and they're struggling in their marriage and they're discouraged, how would you encourage them when in light of what we're talking about?
Yeah. I might start by asking questions. So one question I might ask is, what do you think the purpose of sex in marriage is? And what do you think most people would answer?
Pleasure.
Okay. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, there you go. So
I have no idea what most people would answer. Yeah.
I mean, I have seen that they'll answer things like pleasure or connection or reproduction.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they have like elements of pieces of the purpose of sexuality, but don't really understand the fullness of the purpose of sexuality, which I didn't either until I really began this work of studying the scripture. But the primary purpose of sexual intimacy in marriage is actually, it's a physical expression of the covenant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of the promise.
Yeah.
And so you work on aspects of that. And so like in one of the books that I wrote, God, Sex, and Your Marriage, it goes over 4 aspects of covenant love. And pleasure is one of them.
Yeah.
But I think when we only identify the purpose of sex as being pleasure or being I feel close to you, we miss the spiritual significance of how we work at problems.
Yeah. And
also accepting that problems in your sex life are normal. And they actually have a purpose of calling us to go deeper in true intimacy, because problems require us to not just look at what our bodies are doing in terms of activity, but also to become more vulnerable in the journey of sexuality. So if a couple's struggling, that's kind of the route that I would want to take them.
And that is wonderful, because it takes the eyes off of us,
right,
and ourselves, and puts it on the Lord and the bigger purpose. And I have something encouraging for the listeners. We have 5 copies of God's Sex in Your Marriage, and I'd love to give them to you. Give us a call and ask us a question, 877-548-3675. Again, 877-LIVE-675. Or you can drop me an email, livingbyfaith@moody.edu. Give us a call, 877-548-3675, and we'll give you a copy of God, Sex, and Your Marriage by Dr. Julie Slattery. All right, so there are so many marriages that are, I would say, really struggle in this area. And we could spend the whole time just talking about that. But the second thing that you had mentioned is pornography, which is another, it's rampant. I did an article for Christianity Today, it was several years ago, and focused on female and use of pornography. And I think that was when that one book that I can't think of, 50 Shades. Was popular, and it was, people were shocked that they were flocking to the movies, buying the book. It was just a big deal, and yet I think that it's always probably been there, but it's just now we see it. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that, especially for the women listening, and also how we can break out of fear and shame.
Sure. Yeah. So pornography has always been there, but far more people are using it and addicted to it at this point.
Sure.
Because you used to have to go look for pornography.
Right.
So, even 20 years ago, you'd have to go to an adult video store or bookstore or whatever. The computer changed everything. Our iPhones have changed everything. Artificial intelligence is going to change it even more. Some of the research coming out on what's planned with pornography is just astounding and terrifying. But we also have to recognize that the makers of pornography are motivated by money. And pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry. I have heard somewhere that the porn industry actually makes more than the NFL and the NBA and Major League Baseball put together.
Wow.
I'm like, wow, I don't know if I fact-checked that, but I've heard that a few times. But just to give you an idea, like they are, the porn industry is like, they are counting on getting our kids hooked. And so we see pornography coming through, chats and video games and streaming. And when you are exposed to pornography, particularly in the younger ages, the preteen ages, the teenage ages, the research is showing that it's way more addictive because your brain is in a stage where it is learning quickly. And it's connecting neurons more quickly and creating neural pathways. And so the average woman and man who has been addicted to pornography usually will tell you a story about seeing it anywhere between the ages of 10 and 15 and being like, my brain just lit up. I just was like, what was that? That was crazy. And learning then to go to pornography out of curiosity or depression or boredom or loneliness, and it becomes a way to cope with life. And so when we tell somebody, stop it, they're like, I know it's wrong, but I can't because this has become a way that I cope. And so, that's part of how I've learned that all these sexual issues, we can't just tell people what the biblical standard of behavior is. We have to walk with them in terms of, how is this serving you? How has this become a way to cope, where we need to learn to invite Jesus into the deeper layers of our shame, our wounds, and we need to disciple people out of different temptations and lifestyles that they're struggling with, instead of just giving them a standard and telling them, change yourself.
Yes. And, I behavioral maintenance is not the goal for anyone. It is gospel that changes. It's the gospel that transforms. And so how, if someone's listening right now, in about a minute, can you encourage their faith? They're thinking, I want to be free. Help me, Lord.
In a minute, what I'd say is, let's take seriously what the scripture says in Psalm 139. There is nowhere I can go from God's presence. And I think it's important for us to realize that when you look at pornography, for example, Jesus doesn't leave the room. And he's not just there condemning you. Like, he is our ever-present help in the time of trouble. And so the number one thing is, let's learn to recognize his presence and invite his help in these areas of our lives that sometimes feel so compartmentalized from our life with God.
Yes, we go before a throne of grace. I love Hebrews 4, where it says Jesus was tempted in every way, but without sin. And he invites us to a throne of grace where we receive mercy and help in our time of need. And that there's no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So wherever you are in this journey, that's my prayer and hope, is that you would run to the Lord and that you would not struggle alone and in silence, that it would come to the light. Confess your sin to someone. Confess it to the Lord. He is faithful and just to forgive you and to purify you. More when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I am live in the studio talking with Dr. Julie Slattery, and we are talking about sexuality, and the phone lines are open. I'm giving away her book, God, Sex, and Your Marriage, and you all have a lot of questions. Thank you for calling in. You can join the conversation, and you can give us a call at 877-548-3675 or 877-LIVE-675. Give us a call. We would love to hear from you. And right now, I want to hear from Tamara with Birmingham, Illinois.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I recently heard the term "to touch my soul before touching my body," and that really resonated with me. And so in my marriage, am wondering if you have any thoughts or ideas on what that looks like, how a husband can touch his wife's soul before touching her body.
Yeah, Tamara, that's a great question. In general, women need to feel emotionally connected in order to be sexually connected. But the opposite is true of most men, where actually sexual connection is what helps them feel emotionally connected. And there's actually like neurological research on this, that when a husband says, like, I don't feel connected to you, let's be physical, let's be intimate, that's what helps him feel like he's one with you. And so you've got sort of this different approach, and very often you don't know how to bridge that gap. And the best advice I could give you and your husband is to together read a good Christian book on sex. So there's lots of that you could choose from, like Doug Rosenau's A Celebration of Sex. You could read God, Sex, and Your Marriage. You could read some of Cliff and Joyce Penner's book. Just pick one and read it out loud together. And the thing that does is it helps you learn to communicate how you're different than he is. Because I think often when you just tell your husband, like, I don't feel connected to you, I need you to touch my soul, I need to spend time with you, he doesn't really get it. But when he's hearing it from an external source, that this is actually a very common dynamic in marriage, he will be more open to learning, okay, he'll be learning with you. How do I do that? How do I make you feel safe, connected with me, like I'm caring for you emotionally? So that's kind of a good step that you can take to just get that communication going.
That's great. I think that is likely a common thread in marriages, to try to, you're feeling like, oh, I feel distant, so you don't want to be intimate.
Right.
And so that's very encouraging and helpful. We have Jean from Chicago. You're also on the line. Tamara, stay on the line so that we can get your address. Jean.
Hi, thank you for accepting my call. I just want to know, how can I, as a divorcee, encourage others to not argue in front of their kids and to love each other and appreciate each other?
So you are looking at other marriages, maybe it's your kids' marriages, and you want to encourage them in their marriage? They're having problems and you want to encourage them in their marriage. How can we help with that, Julie?
Yeah, I think younger people need the encouragement of their mentors, their parents, the people they love to speak life into them in marriage. And a few things that I think you can do is, number one, validate that marriage is hard work. We don't want to have this negative view of, oh, it's so hard, marriage is so hard. But there are seasons where it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
And the reason it's supposed to be hard is because God really, really wants to teach us how to love each other well. And you actually don't really know that you love your spouse until it's hard to love them. Otherwise, it's just sort of responding to what feels good to you. And so I think validating when there's struggles. I think another thing would be to always encourage them to seek help, whether that help comes from meeting with a mentor couple, meeting with a counselor. We can't do marriage alone. We need that third party who can help us address conflict, who can address red flags when they're there. And marriage, there's hard marriage when it's like, okay, we have conflict, we can't agree. But then there's those red flag issues where you really do need intervention. When there's addiction involved, if there's deceit involved, betrayal involved, if there's any form of emotional or physical or spiritual abuse, like you need eyes on that marriage. And so I think what we can do as parents and as mentors is be giving some of that framework of what are some normal struggles and how can we encourage you in those, and when do we see something that really does require some third-party intervention to just help make sure things are healthy.
No, I think that's so important. It's incredibly important to pull someone in if it's unhealthy, and if it's abusive, you might need to call the cops. So
yes, yeah.
you would I think that's something that is so hard, but it is necessary for a healthy life, a healthy and God honoring marriage and life. So yes, thank you so much for that, Jean. Stay on the line. We'll get your address so that we can mail you God's Sex in Your Marriage. We've been talking a lot about marriage, but you did bring up children, and as a mom to two teenagers, I'd love to get some advice.
Okay.
But so now it's turned to
asking
advice.
for a friend.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
No, but actually, you mentioned something that was startling. If kids are exposed to pornography, I think you said from ages 11 to 15 or 12
it can
to
be
15.
Earlier. I've heard stories of 6 or 7 year olds, but
that breaks my heart.
Yes.
But that's when addiction can happen. So here's my big question: what can parents do to protect, especially right now, where a phone? I mean, pornography is not that far away from them at any given time.
Yeah.
How can parents protect their kids?
Yeah, boy, that's a $1 million question
It
right
is.
now. I think first of all, we have to start very young talking about sexuality, like way more young than you're probably comfortable. But teaching your kids about their bodies, using the correct terminology, having normal conversations about just how their bodies are functioning, how babies are made, not being squeamish about that.
Yeah.
And then starting at 6, 7, 8, start introducing, not in a fearful way, but the concept that you may see things where people are not clothed. And if you ever see that, that's not your fault, but please tell me.
Yeah.
Or if anybody ever touches you in a way that
Yes.
makes you feel uncomfortable, that sort of thing, you're sort of planting seeds that this can happen. You're not doing it in a fearful way, but I want you to know that you can always come and talk to me, and we're here to help you. So the more you can have those kinds of conversations and normalize those conversations, the more likely your child is to, when they see pornography or when a friend does something or when they're in an uncomfortable situation, they'll tell you. Even at very young ages.
Yeah.
And then if and when they do tell you, it's important to react with first, hey, thank you for telling me. That was so brave of you to tell me. Yeah. And this is not your fault. Let's talk about what happened and how we can keep your eyes safe, that sort of thing. So it's an ongoing dialogue. And then, so that's sort of like preparing them for the inevitable that they are going to see it at some point. But then also being as vigilant as you can with the devices in our homes.
Yeah.
And it's not just phones, it's iPads and iPods, and
Yeah.
it's the
everything.
gaming consoles, and like it comes through everything that's connected to the internet. And so being wise with having devices in public places, like in your living room, nothing in bedrooms. The research is saying do not give kids a cell phone until probably high school age.
Yeah.
Do not give them social media until they're 16. And even then, provide supervision for how they're using those things. So and that's hard because like all their friends have it. This is how they connect through direct messaging.
Yeah.
So it's really being vigilant and having the hard conversations.
Yeah. We can do it, parents. We can have those conversations. We can be vigilant. We need the help of God, and He is available to us. More when we return. Welcome back to Living by Faith with Trillia Newbell. I'm talking with Dr. Julie Slattery, and we are talking about some really important conversations and thinking through sexuality. We were just talking about how parents can equip and protect and be vigilant with their children. And it brought to mind your third topic for that we said in, I think it was the second segment, about purity culture. And I was telling you that I became a Christian at the age of 22. I didn't grow up in church. I didn't really grow up in this subculture. Now, I was exposed to some legalism because I became a Christian at the age of 22. But I just didn't know much about this. So why would purity culture lead to some of the things that we've been talking about in regards to the confusion with sexuality?
So in general, like purity culture is essentially saying that God cares about your sexuality purely because it's a behavioral issue. Mm-hmm. And if you love God, if you're a follower of God, if you don't want to have a bad life, then follow the rules. And so people grow up with that, and it kind of has led to a lot of backlash, and it's led to some negative effects. For example, you have people that grew up in purity culture that would say, I essentially learned to not trust myself sexually at all. Like even within marriage, once I got married, I can't enjoy it because sex was always bad and sexual feelings were always bad. Purity culture also doesn't give any context for what does it mean to be single and have sexual desires. Like, is there a purpose for my sexuality? Maybe you're a 50-year-old single person. It's like, okay, marriage isn't there. So has God let me down?
Yeah.
Like, is there even any purpose for this? Why do I have desire? What do I do with desire? Purity culture just is so rule-based that it doesn't ever explain the heart of God related to our sexuality. But I think one of the biggest things, Trillia, is that purity culture kind of presented sexuality as a pass-fail test for a lot of people. It's like either you're pure or you're impure.
Yeah.
And if you're pure, I think some people that would put themselves in that category of, I did it the right way, you can kind of have a posture of self-righteousness or judging people that that have a sexual past or who struggle. And the people who would say, I'm not pure, I'm messed up, or I struggle with this, or I'm addicted to pornography, there's a sense that I've ruined my life. And God can give me maybe a plan B, but like I'm just a different type of Christian. And so often they walk with sort of a low-grade fever of shame for the rest of their lives, feeling that they can never truly experience the freedom of God's forgiveness. And so I think that's probably the biggest issue, because now we start to get into misunderstanding what the gospel actually says, that we are all broken, we're all fallen.
Right.
Our righteousness is as filthy rags compared to God's holiness, and we all are in need of our Savior, and our purity comes through not our behavior, but comes through the righteousness that Jesus purchased for us on the cross. And so instead of purity language, I like to talk about integrity. Like if I am a follower of Christ, that means that my whole life is surrendered to him. And so what does it mean for me as a married woman to walk with sexual integrity,
Right.
including how I manage sexuality within my marriage? What does it look like for me as a mom to walk with sexual integrity as I disciple my kids in this area?
Yeah.
What does it look like for me to interact with my neighbors who don't know the Lord? And so I love the concept of integrity because it's a greater call on our life actually than just
Yeah.
a pass-fail behavior test, but also that integrity means that I take seriously the words of Jesus when he says, you are forgiven, you are cleansed, you are free, you wear my righteousness before the Father. And so I think when we have that vision, it's a healthier, more biblical understanding of what it is to walk towards the Lord and what he's done in our life.
You know, I was just thinking about the it's not a title, but the name of your ministry, Authentic Intimacy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you, but that kind of living authentically before the Lord and with each other with integrity
Yeah.
is something that I love that. I love that shift, that kind of shift of frame of mind. And because then you can ask the Lord for help and not feel shame when you mess up, that you want to live and walk with integrity. And it's I think that's really encouraging. Now, I wonder if we took a poll of people who walk in shame, I wonder if it's those who grew up in the church who walk in who battle with that shame a little bit more than maybe those who sinned but did not, because that it isn't something that I have battled with.
Yeah.
But I wonder if for me, grace was just so amazing
Yeah.
that I just thought, well, I'm pure, I'm washed clean.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus. You know,
Yes.
this is amazing. I am covered. I'm forgiven.
Yeah.
But I could imagine that, say, one of my kids, if they mess up because they've learned,
They should know better.
they
kind
should.
of thing.
Yes.
Yes.
That's an interesting.
I think you're 100% right there. I love the story of the prodigal son, which is
Yeah.
really, we call the prodigal son, but it's really about the father.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right that the prodigal son who went away, came to his senses and came back, he knew that he had nothing to bring to the Father, but he received this celebration, this grace, these open arms. And then you've got the brother there who never left the Father, but he's got his own like stuff stirring the bitterness, and he never has that same dramatic experience of receiving grace. And so I think often when you grow up in the church, these things get mixed. You don't know what is grace and how am I still trying to earn God's love, and I should know better. And you don't have that come to Jesus moment where you just know how to bring it all before his feet and trust him. And so I think that's a different journey for those who've grown up in the church, but we all still need to have that prodigal son moment.
Absolutely.
Whether it's we were right next door to the Father or we were far away. Like if we don't end up in the place where we realize we bring nothing to him and receive everything, we don't know what it is to walk in freedom and grace.
Yeah. Some people listening might be like, this topic, I don't know if it actually relates to me, but you have often said we are all sexually broken.
Yep.
So what do you mean by that? Why is it important? And where's the gospel hope?
Yeah, so, again, this sort of flows out of what we just said. If we have a very limited view of God's design for sex, where it's just, check the box, have you saved sex for marriage? Some people would say, well, I'm not broken. I'm not looking at porn. Like I've not sinned. But when we have the greater view of actually integrity, that God calls us to surrender all of our hearts, all of our lives, our thoughts to him, we realize, wow, in my thoughts, how much have I objectified people or judged people? Or how have I used sexuality in a way, even within marriage, perhaps, that is self-serving rather than a true celebration of covenant love? Like we start to realize, like we all are sinful and broken, and we all need help recovering the beautiful gift of sexuality that has become clouded with so much shame and confusion. And it's gospel hope because, again, that means that we all have this invitation, even as we get ready to celebrate Christ's death and resurrection, to receive fully that he died for us. And he sets us free, whether we are the brother at home who doesn't fully recognize our need for him or the brother coming home. That we all need to be in that place of recognizing that our Savior has given us that confidence to come before God and to have true fellowship with him. So I think when we recognize that we're all sexually broken, it takes us out of that place of being hypocritical or judgmental, and we just become dependent on God's grace every day to keep growing and surrendering more deeply to his truth and his love.
I know that people are going to be listening and they're going to be thinking, I want more. So we, of course, will have your information in our show notes, but where can they find you?
Yeah, AuthenticIntimacy.com is our website home, and you can find pretty much everything we do there. I have loved partnering with Moody to create lots of resources that can help you go deeper in these different questions, whether it's a pornography battle or marriage or singleness or parenting. So Moody's also a good stop to get some resources.
Yes, so she's talking about Moody Publishers.
Yes.
Come join us over there as well. Thank you so much. This was so good, so rich, and I am so grateful for you, Dr. Julie Slattery. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
It has been. Also, thanks to the behind-the-scenes team at Moody Radio, my associate producer, Lisa Jimty, my engineer, Merle St. James, Titus on the phone lines, and Karen. She didn't put her name down. To grow daily in your faith, you can tune into my 52 Weeks in the Word podcast. You can find it at moodyradio.org. To hear today's program again, you'll find it at livingbyfaithradio.org or on the Moody Radio app. You may also connect with us through Facebook and Instagram at Living by Faith. Living by Faith is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Bible Institute.